Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 9, and this lesson we're going to be creating our WPF project. So let's go right over to the homework and see what we have to do. Create a WPF project in our current solution. Add the ability to use dependency injection. Now implied in there is also add a reference to our class library and get that set up just like we did when we set up our Razor Pages project. Now, dependency injection in WPF is a little trickier. And the reason why is because even in the .NET Core 3.0 and 3.1 projects for WPF, they don't have the built-in dependency injection turned on by default. Now, there's ways of doing it, and we're going to do that. And for a little hint, in our last module where we had dependency injection inside of a console application, we did a couple of things. Actually, I believe we didn't have dependency injection, we just had configuration. So that's a start there, and then you'll have to do some tweaking to get dependency injection involved. So if you can't get that, don't worry, at least get the project set up and references added and all the rest, and then I will show you how to get dependency injection fully in place in WPF. But give it a shot, see what you can do, maybe do some research on the internet. This is a good time to practice what to do when you don't know how to do something, because it's going to happen over and over and over. You cannot have someone always tell you what to do. At some point, you need to transition into being able to do it yourself. That comes from practice. This is a low pressure practice. Now, don't take that to mean you shouldn't practice or you should slack off. Instead, just do the opposite. Push hard. See if you can get it to work. Because the worst thing that happens is you watch the video where I do it. That's the worst case scenario. Meaning there's not a whole lot of downside here. If you're in a job and you get stuck where there isn't that safety net of a video showing you how to do it, you might have bigger issues. So practice now so you have those skills. Okay? So go ahead and pause the video now, get the WPF project in your solution, and try and get dependency injection and configuration set up as well. All right? So go ahead and pause the video. All right. Hopefully you got that done, or at least the majority of it. So let's talk through how to get this set up. Let's go over to Visual Studio. We'll right-click on Hotel app, and we're going to say Add, New Project. We're going to search for WPF, and we're going to make sure we choose WPF.NET Core, not .NET Framework. So .NET Core WPF application. Hit Next. We're going to say this is Hotel app.desktop and hit Create. This will create for us our WPF application. It will create for us a .NET Core 3.1 application, I believe. We go to Properties here. We'll see that, yes, it is .NET Core 3.1. That's good. So we have to do a build here to get this to restore. Let's also set as a startup project first. And now we'll do a build solution. And that should restore the projects and packages we need. And it does. And now we have our main window. All right, so there we go. We are all set up with our project. And if we were to start this, it's going to start main window. Now, why is that? Because in app.xaml, we have startup URI is main window.xaml. That's where we indicate this is what's going to start up. Let's get rid of that. So now we don't have anything that's going to start up, which of course we can't have in the long run. But we're going to go to the code behind for this app.xaml.cs, and we're going to make some modifications in this code behind. Before we do, though, I do want to add a few NuGet packages we're going to need. So let's right-click on Dependencies and say Manage NuGet Package. Installed currently is none. So let's go over to Browse. We're going to browse first for Microsoft.extensions app.configuration.binder. What this will allow us to do is to talk to the app.settings.config file or app.settings.json file with some extensions and shortcuts. So we want this. We also want the app or Microsoft.extensions.configuration.json. This is what will allow us to talk to and read from that app.settings.json file. So we're going to install that here. And then finally, we want Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection. Okay, and there we go. And we'll install that as well. So those are the 3 packages we need. So dependency injection for dependency injection, and then 2 for our configuration. 1 for talking to the app.settings.json file, which we don't have yet. We will. And the other for making it easier to read from that file using some extension methods. Okay, so we now have the settings we need. So let's go over here, and we're going to say that we want to override the onStartup method. So protected override. We have a few options here, but one of them is going to be onStartup. Double click that, and that creates for us this override method. Now, if you remember back from, I believe it was Module 6, Module 4 and Module 6, we talked about object-oriented programming, Part 1 and Part 2. I believe it's Part 2 where we talked about having a base class and then having a way to override the methods from the base class. Well, that's what we're doing here. There's a base class, this application class, and there's a method in there called onStartup. And we're saying we want to override that to add our own startup stuff. Okay, so we're going to start by saying base.onStartup, which means inside the application class there's the onStartup. Call that onStartup method first and run that. So we're going to add on top of that method, not just replace it. We're going to say var services equals new service collection, control dot to adding using statement there for Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection. Now we're going to say services dot add transient, and let's say main window. What is main window? Well, that is the main window right here. That's our main window. It's our only form right now. Okay, so we're going to add transient. That sounds familiar? That's because that is adding main window to dependency injection. Now, no, I don't have an interface. That's okay. I can just add the actual type. So when you call for that type, you get back an instance of base path directory, control dot here. If this looks familiar, that's because it is from the, we did this in our console applications in Module 8, where we talked about data access. We did this quite a bit. So get current directory. So it's going to find the current directory. We're going to add a JSON file. That's where we had that one Microsoft extensions for configuration. It was jace.json. That's what allows us to do this add JSON file. It also allows us to do this set base path as well. So add JSON file, app settings.json, which is the default name and one you should keep. And that's it. We're not going to do other configuration. We can down the road. Remember, this is an MVP, so it's as simple as possible to get the job done, and that's what we're doing here. But later on, if we want to add Key Vault, not really a problem. We just add Key Vault into this list. So one configuration, one place, and now it will enable it to work with Key Vault as well. So we're all set there. Now we can do the I configuration, and we'll say config equals builder.build. Now I specifically said I configuration because typically build returns an I configuration root. But I actually want to return an I configuration. That way, when I add this to my services, it's an I configuration. So I ask for an I configuration, I get this config. So services.add singleton. Now this means it's going to return the same instance each time. Config. And there's a singleton to add. So this is pre-instantiated. I've instantiated it right here. So this is already live instance, and I just put this into dependency injection, which means when I ask for it, when I ask for an I configuration, I will get this instance every time. Now I can say var service provider equals services dot build service provider, and var main window equals service provider dot get service main window. Okay, so I'm actually talking already to my service provider, which is these are the services here. This is my dependency injection. And I'm saying, you know what? Give me some value out of you for main window, which we've said as a transient. Now I have an instance of main window. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, because we're going to say main window dot show. So we're going to take the instance of main window we got out of the configuration builder, and we're going to show that on the screen, which means we can launch this application right now, and it should run, except for one little thing. We don't have a app settings.json file yet. So let's add one. Right click on the desktop, and we're going to say add new item, search for JSON, select JSON file, and change the name to app settings.json. Again, empty file. Now what I'm going to do, I do know that I need settings in there for my connection string. So let's go over to my app settings for my web, and let's grab the connection string. And then I'll paste it in here. Now I have the connection string over here as well. Now it should be, if I launch this application, oh, I forgot one thing that I always seem to forget at least once. You'll find it in just a second. And it says, hey, there was the configuration file app settings.json was not found and it's not optional. Why is that? Because Tim forgot the setting. Right click on app settings.json, go to properties, and say copy if newer. That will copy it into the build directory or the release directory when you do a run of this project. Now we launch this, and it should be that our application launches. It does, and we have our window here. A lot of work for pretty much just doing what it did before, but we're now set up to have our dependency injection and including our configuration all in our application. But we're not quite done yet, because we do want to go to dependencies, right click and say add reference to our library, the same library that the web uses. In this library we have a SQL data and a SQL data access. Both of those need to be added. So services. Let's make our life easy. Let's go up here and add using statements. Using hotel app library dot data and using hotel app library dot databases. With those two using statements, now we can say services dot add transient. We'll say iSQL data access is SQL data access, and services dot add transient for iDatabase or data adapter. Nope. iDatabase data, there we go, is SQL data. Like so. And now we've mapped those two things. Now we're all set to ask for those things anywhere. So for example, we could go over into our main set up. So we're good to go. We have dependency injection working as it should. And now we can move on to actually building out our application. So we'll close all of this. And that's it for setting up our WPF application. Now in the next video, we will create our search form.